Show. In the last 2 days, we've witnessed a sit-down with the candidates of the Labour Party, His Excellency Peter Gregory Obi, and his running mate, Dr. Yusuf Datti Baba Ahmed, and also of the People's Redemption Party, Mr. Kolawole Abiola and Mr. Haruna Zego. Today, we will take a look at some key moments of those conversations, and my guests will give their thoughts on the candidates over the next 25 minutes. Joining me today are Fumi Onajuefe, who is a journalist at Plus TV Africa, and Abdul Karim Baba Aminu, who's a columnist with Daily Trust newspaper. Now we begin our conversation today with a brief look at the fourth town hall with the presidential and vice presidential candidates of the Labour Party.
Good evening, Mr. Obi. I am Rahman Adeja from Mass Communication Level 4 student. Sir, do you believe in Biafran self-determination agitation? In a simple answer, yes or no. Also, what is your idea of federalism and restructuring? Thank you, sir.
He said my young, because at this stage, I haven't had 2 graduates. I'll call the person who asked the question a son.
Yes.
Because I have 2 graduates at home. Let me tell you, when it comes to the issue of agitation, it's not yes or no. People agitate everywhere, even in my house. You know? So when the first thing you do with an agitator is to sit down and listen to the person who is agitating. Unless you sit down, you cannot say yes or no. I'm a Nigerian. I'm contesting election as a Nigerian. I'm not contesting from any other place. I'm a Nigerian. I believe in Nigeria. I believe in unity of Nigeria. And I believe that I'm going to bring all agitators back to Nigeria and make it work for them. Because the reason why they're agitating is injustice. When you provide justice, equity, and create a level playing field where people start whatever, there will be agitation. So there was agitation. There was agitation. There was agitation for, don't forget, there was agitation yesterday in America.
Yes.
Before. Don't think America is like this. There was agitation before. There was agitation before in Brazil. I can show countries where there's so much agitation. But when level playing field were created, where people hard work, talent, much of the opportunity, all these things will go.
Okay.
Right. So, that was just a brief moment in what was a 2-hour conversation, right? And I find it interesting that on the matter of self-actualization, agitation, as he said, he said, look, we're going to sit down and we'll talk first. Because it's an approach to a softer tactic as opposed to saying that, look, we're going to carry the stick and beat about. So, Abdul Karim, I want to come to you first. Is it interesting in any way that you've got someone vying for office who's talking about using softer tactics first than the more difficult brute force?
Thank you, Nabila. I would say it hits me in a number of ways, and I'm not sure how to feel about it, but I really think, I strongly believe it's being gone about in a way that's not what we need right now. There are far too many problems that require immediate attention. Some of the candidates, including Pio himself, have brought it up in their, what we could call their campaigns, because so far, I don't really see the campaigns. But that's another thing. They do it, they just touch on it, or on those issues, and I think those are the main things. So I see all this talk about federalism, about, talking, and it's a bit distracting from the main issues.
All right. Okay. So for me, how about you? What do you think? Do you agree that it is distracting from the real issues?
His answer or
From his response?
No, I don't think it's distracting. So first of all, I agree with Peter when he said he has to listen because everybody has used the stick and it hasn't gotten us anywhere. Whether we like it or not, like you rightly said, some people, it's interesting now that it's people from the East that are agitating. Remember that when it was Jonathan, it was the Niger Delta. So there will always be some sort of agitation one way or the other. So he has given a fantastic answer. The only thing is, if he gets there, is that truly what he's going to do? Because you see, it's very easier from the other side of the fence to postulate and say, okay, yes, you listen, but you listen, and then what happens next? Will you look at their agitation and say it's realistic? Can you meet it? Can you match it? Can you just, talk about it? So for me, I don't feel like he's distracted. He has been given a fantastic answer.
So interestingly, he does talk about giving justice and equity, and he believes that, that would be the answer. And I wonder if it's too simplistic. I understand that justice and equity are needed to keep a sane society, if you like, a thriving society. But do you think that it's as simple as that?
No, of course, not as simple as that. But all the agitators that come forward claim that they are being marginalized, because that's like a very common word now, syllable today. So if he says to you, if you say to me that you're being marginalized and what you want is equity and fairness, and I come to you and I say that's what I'm going to bring to the table, well, we'll never know if that's going to be good enough or simple enough, but that is what even the agitators say they want. They want to be recognized. They want to have things fairly done to them. So yes, it may not be as simple. Nothing in Nigeria is as simple. Is simple. Nothing is. So until they get onto that seat and see how it is, then we'll have to wait till then.
Right. So, Abdul Karim, the other part of that question, or the first part was really, the second part was about federalism and restructuring. And you said just a moment ago that you think it's distracting from the real issues. What do you think are the real issues?
Security, the economy, the security,
Again.
security.
Right.
A quick look at it. If you look at the elections, they're coming soon. There are loads of places that we're not sure if they're going to have, the chance to vote at all. There are all kinds of security threats, all over the country. Shouldn't we be talking about that, which will in turn sort of allay the fears of voters, so that they can come out and exercise their civic rights?
But I mean, that would likely be a conversation that's more for the present administration. But through the course of that 2 hours...
I'm sorry, Nabila.
Yes.
The thing is, if the candidates themselves make these talking points,
Right.
it would really, really go a long way in helping, to show that this is what they would want to have, but not talking about, for me, in this situation, talking about federalism and inclusion and all that. It's all kinds of pies in the sky.
I disagree. So when he talked about the economy, when Peter Obi talked about the economy, for example, he said one of the reasons why he has to face the economy, because one of the reasons we have insecurities, also an economic challenge, whether we agree to it or not. And he has already identified with his economic plan that that's one of the things he's going to address. Because the truth is, if you don't handle some of these things, and you see that true federalism he's also talking about, why did we have a confirmed meeting that the changes were never effected into the Constitution? Because that thing is the core of who we are. If we don't begin to define it, we'll never begin to find ourselves as a people. So we'll put one patch here, there'll be one patch today, we'll release another money for the budget, for security, put another economic plan, have some people 5,000 naira or 6,000 naira. But that doesn't solve the problem. So once we begin to look at the structure of the country, from the local government to the state government, and dissect all those issues out, then every other thing will begin to sort out itself. That's what I think. And
For me, sorry, Nabila, for me now,
well,
because
this is an interesting interaction.
problem hasn't been addressed earlier, doesn't mean it shouldn't be attempted again. And these
All
are
right, so
important
let me
things.
come in here for a moment, right? And perhaps I'll take up from you for me. It's interesting that you talk about, or you reference his point that the economy has to come first and everything will fall in line. And here's why it's interesting. We know that the present administration has made certain moves towards shoring up different aspects of our economy. More prominently is agriculture. We've seen also infrastructural developments in terms of roads, right? Bridges. All of this has been happening. However, the security factor continues to haunt them every single time. And I find it interesting that His Excellency, Mr. Peter Obi, would not... in some ways, I understand what he means when he says, I won't discuss my security plans because you want them to hear, but then you want to govern over 200 million people who are facing a present, very real security threat. And you're not an ex-military man. We currently have an ex-military man, and it hasn't helped
I was just about to
thousands of
say
people.
so.
Yeah.
When you say you need to cut him some slack here, because your ex-military president laid out some plans, wore a military uniform, did us some PR stunt, and said he was going to stamp out Boko Haram in the first year. We are where we were. We are still in the same place. So you need to cut Peter Obi some slack. If he has come out to other plans and say, look, he will do this in the economy, he will do all the other things, because if the military, ex-military president currently now has not found a solution to these things, you do not expect, I'm not saying he's not going to bring a solution, and if he feels uncomfortable with laying all his cards on the table, then please, if he has answered all the other questions concerning the economy, which some of the leading candidates have refused to even answer or even come forward to the table to even address at all, I think you should cut him some slack on that.
Right. So we'll take a moment. Next up is our look at the fifth conversation with Mr. Kolawole Abiola and his running mate, Mr. Haru Haruna Zego of the People's Redemption Party.
Mr. Abiola, you have not ventured into public service. You have always been in business, among which are banking industry, Bank PHB, and Habib Bank, which you chaired into near bankruptcy. So your management skills seem to lack the depth of holding the highest office, in the country. So how can you convince Nigerians that you can manage a complex system as Nigeria? Thank you.
Thank you. Number one, Bank PHB and Habib Bank. Habib Bank wasn't a failed institution before it got merged into PHB. But that's not so much the point. The point is that if you take out and take collectively what I have achieved in Nigeria and in the private sector, so there is one little bad egg.
That's a little glitch. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry?
Is that a little glitch?
Look, I've done a lot of good things that I'm not one to blow my own trumpet.
But if there's a time to blow your horn, it is now.
I've done so much that to the point that if you go to Taraba State, there's a whole local government named after me in Taraba because of what I achieved there. If you go to Edo State, you will see what I've done on oil and gas. We have even one of the first few refineries coming up very soon. Nobody hears about those things. But what you hear about is somebody talking about Habib Bank or collectively a lot of the industries we have in the past. I pray that we never have to, at a very tender age, I think I was 36, 37, have to fight the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Because I have been able to take them on, I have survived it, and I'm still standing today. And that is experience that I wish nobody has to ever go through. When the government fights you, they fight you with everything. But the idea is to chop off your kneecaps.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, that question was a hard hitter, right? It seemed like he came for the jugular. Yeah. But perhaps, you know what, let's start by getting your reaction for me to how Mr. Kola Abiola answered that question. What do you think?
I think he answered it pretty well, in my opinion. And one of the things you must understand about Kola Abiola is one of the richest people in this country, but that likes to stay in the background. And you see, I like the question that Kadira told him, that you have to blow your own trumpet, because that's one of the things that I don't think he knows how to do very well, to say that, oh, he has done this, because he likes to keep a low profile. But you see, for these presidential elections, you can't keep a low profile. Bring out everything from your grandfather's grave, everything you've done, and try and whip up the sentiments, even though I don't know if that sentiment that people have towards his father is going to be able to translate that into votes. But I think he spoke very well as a fantastic candidate who I wish could get more PR and more leverage, but, we'll see what happens.
Right. So, Abdul Karim, I'll piggyback off that, right, talking about his father's legacy, because this was a time that a lot of people continue to reference when they talk about the height of democracy in Nigeria or the golden age of democracy. But I'm wondering if it's still relevant as an example of the golden age, considering that, again, his father's legacy doesn't seem to be following him. People don't really know if he's on the scene or not.
Thanks, Nabila. First of all, I will say I disagree a little bit because, he seems to have picked up a little bit of steam lately.
Right.
He's more out there talking very well, for that matter. He's got obviously a lot to give, and he positions himself very well, and he talks about it very well. All the times I've seen him speak, I've been incredibly impressed, to be honest. He's one of the bright spots on the horizon.
I agree.
Fumi agrees as well.
I totally agree with that.
So,
now, sorry, just right back to what you asked about his legacy, let's put it that way. Yes, it's absolutely good and necessary even to put it, forth.
all right.
Yes, it's what Kadaria said, you have to blow your trumpet.
Yeah.
That is one of the trumpets he needs to blow.
So here's what I'm really asking about, right? MK Abiola is a big name in Nigerian history. And he's so big that even there are younger generations that when they reference him, they may not know who he was, but he seems larger than life right now.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that has translated into some form of influence for Kola Abiola. That's really where I'm going to. Perhaps for me, you'd like to take a shot.
I don't think it has translated to an influence. Maybe if he came out just shortly after his father passed on, it might have. But right now, several years have passed. And, so we'll always have that sentiment. We'll always love MK Abiola. But I don't know if that, again, will translate to votes of me going to vote for his son. So, and most of the real sentiment that people had towards his dad was because of the whole election, the process. He was a wealthy man who, Kola Abiola is more, should I say, strict. So, for example, I read up on him of how in Concord he fired some of the employees of his father. There was no sentiment. He doesn't have time for all of that rubbish or that emotional thing of how his father would have, how our parents could be, just leave him there. He's my grandfather's legacy translated for him. Right now, I don't think so.
Right. So, Abdul Karim, I want to come to the personality aspect, right? Because Fumi just touched on some of it, a no-nonsense attitude. And he did speak about his background for just a brief moment that day. This was just yesterday, actually. Yeah. It seems so far away. But yes, he spoke about his background and spoke about how he didn't really grow up in the affluence that his father came to be known for, right? And I'm wondering if you think that it will in some way affect the empathy that he would need to have with the Nigerian people that he's looking to lead.
You say Nigerian people. We all know that's a complex collective animal,
right.
Yeah. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on, where the wind blows. But in my own opinion, I think it would actually help. It's always good for people to feel, oh, this is one of us, or, he's had the kind of maybe hard times, we had, he's basically like one of us, a normal, everyday Nigerian. And I think to a certain extent, he's not acting it. It's true. You could see he's down to earth. He's got a connection with people. So I would say yes. I think it would help.
So for me, there's something about Nigerian politics that's quite repetitive, right? Okay. This bit that Abdul Karim just talked about makes me remember former President Goodluck Jonathan, and not just him, actually. President Muhammadu Buhari also has that record, right? I've got just 2 houses. I'm a herder. I've got cows in my farm at home, and I live the simple life. Yeah. Do you think that it's essentially one chance?
Well, it's a human thing. Look at all the reality shows. Everybody had to come with some sub-story to win the, to win the grand prize. So it's a human thing. We always have to look for something. You don't want to present yourself too affluent so that it doesn't seem like you are the dam that we're trying to fight against. You have to bring yourself down to the people. Yes, the 1% of the 1%. So you have to bring yourself down to the people of how you suffered. You had no shoes, how you have only 1 cow. Even though we know that some other people they have bought you 500 cows somewhere, So we always have to bring that story to relate with the common man, to say that, look, I'm one of you, and it's almost like grassroots politics. It's part of the game to win the votes as well. So yes, everybody will have a sub-story. If they don't, they should find one. We all need a sub-story to connect with you. So yes, it's a human thing.
So let's talk about the strength of the party, the PRP, right? And especially because we know that the way Nigerian, not just the politics, but even the legal side, we know that it's the party that essentially wins a seat, whatever that seat may be. And I'm wondering what sort of value you would see the PRP bringing to the rest of his campaign trail, essentially. We'll go with you first.
Wow, I had to ask me this complex question first. I don't know, because is he honest to God? Until this debate came along, I didn't even know the name of his party. I'll be honest. I didn't know because at first I was thinking I was going to go with the SDP, which was the party that his father was in. So it was towards when this debate started with the candidates that I found out the name of his, remember the name of his full party. I know it, but it's not something like from the top of your head. I just come out and just say. So I don't know. So I don't know how he's going because I don't even know who his, state candidates are in the states. In Lagos State, for example, and that's already a challenge if we don't even know who. Because, for example, Peter Obi is not such a popular party, but because there's been a movement beside him, people can go and throw his name. So even in the posters, when you see with the Labour Party people, they're putting obedience in their flyer now. I don't know if PRP brings that value to the table.
All right. So it's interesting that she makes a reference to the Labour Party and His Excellency's run for office, right? Because both the Labour Party and the PRP have been around for quite some time. But this electoral cycle has seen a resurgence for them, a fresh look. Sure. There are younger people who know their name. It's no longer, someone who's been around for multiple electoral cycles throwing off the dust and saying, oh, I remember this party. Do you think that we can sustain this up until the next electoral cycle?
Yeah, it is quite possible. Look at the landscape, or let's say look at the main candidates. They're all, I don't want to say popular, but they're all known quantities. Everyone brings something to the table. Peter Obi, Atiku, Tinubu, Abiola. I don't want to list the whole thing, but everyone brings something to the table. They're known. What is left is for that, being known to translate into actual staying power, at the polls, and to actually get the numbers to get them to come out and do what it is they've been promising to do. And I would like to have a crack at what she said about the political party. I had a wow moment when you said that, but it just goes to show you how much work they need to do. No one really knows. Well, not no one. A lot of people don't really know. Yeah, I was going to go the easy route of making fun of you and say like, "Oh, how old are you?" And but that would have been in bad taste. So, but it just goes to show you. I happen to know maybe because of a few factors. Okay. But not everyone knows. Right. They really need to come out, and it's translating into Mr. Abiola's campaign in a way. He or they really need to come out, maybe revamp how, just have a couple of months. They need to revamp. They really need to get back to the drawing board. There's a lot of capital that is not being touched.
Right. So I do wonder how much of this attention, the influence can translate or transpire from the candidate to the party, so that when movements are created as we go, they're actually around those parties. People feel that they're a part of that democratic process from the political party level. Do you think we'll see that going forward? Will we see, say, 2028 now, right? Or 2027, pardon me. Do you see 2027 giving us a lot more political parties on the landscape, beyond Labour Party, beyond PRP, AAC, the parties we sat down with in the course of these last few days? Do you see that happening?
Oh, yes. Like with every election cycle, new parties always just come up. So, yes. But there'll be, also typical of Nigeria, there'll be breakaway from some of the parties, from the APC, from the PDP, and then they'll create. It's interesting that this year we don't have the third force. So there'll be new parties. Exactly, third force. So there'll be new parties whether we like it or not. But how strong will the existing parties, will Labour Party be as strong as it is now in 2027? Right. I think that's a question we should ask. Will APC still be existing in 2027? Even PDP, with all the internal factors they are having currently, will they still exist in a few years' time? So I think those are the questions. The smaller parties coming up, that's always just, that's normal. They're going to come up. But those three big parties, will they still be standing?
Regardless of the party, they're essentially vying for a position that faces the same challenges, whether it's in security or if it's in economy, education, name it. Nigeria is a pot of many good and bad things, right? So they will face it if they clinch that office. So I want to get your thoughts very quickly on a couple of things. Youth, what do you think the candidates now, not just the Labour Party and the PRP, but what do you think that the next president needs to focus on when it comes to the youth, for me?
One, listen. You really have to sit down and listen, because a lot of our fantastic talents are relocated everywhere, all over the world, but here.
Right.
So you have to find whatever it is that you can to keep our best hands here, and it's just by fixing the simple things, just power, the roles, because people are really not even asking for so much. Just to be
so
secure.
Abdulkareem, very quickly, I get your thoughts on that. What they need to do?
I don't know, job creation, there's all kinds of industries that are non-existent in Nigeria. We have the numbers to really harness all those things. So jobs, basically.
Okay. So look, in the series so far, we have had 5 candidates and their running mates, from the SDP to the AAC, then the NNPP, followed by the Labour Party, LP, and just yesterday, the PRP. It goes without saying that they do have an uphill climb ahead of them. And as we wrap up the conversation today on the Pundit Show, I do want you to stay around for a few more minutes. Coming up in just a bit will be discussions around the things that will define Nigerians and the office of the president over the next 4 years. I am Nabila Usman. Good evening.
University of Ibadan, alma mater to great thespians, novelists, and politicians of the great nation of Nigeria. The University of Ibadan is located in Oyo State, southwest Nigeria. It was founded in 1948 and was one of many colleges within the University of London. Becoming an independent university in 1962, the University of Ibadan is the oldest degree-awarding institution in Nigeria. The University of Ibadan has contributed to the political, industrial, economic, and cultural development of Nigeria. Among this notable group are Nobel Prize winner Wole Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, a novelist and author of Things Fall Apart, Abdul Ganiyu Abdul Razak, a lawyer and former president of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and so many more. Bayelsa is an oil-producing state in the south-south region of Nigeria. It was created in 1996 by the then military administration. Bayelsa has also produced prominent people such as Ben Murray Bruce, a businessman and senator, Dakore Egbusin Akonde, a Nigerian actress. She is an ambassador for Amnesty International, Timi Dakolo, musician and businessman, and so many more. Recently, Bayelsa has been seriously affected by the flooding situation that has plagued Nigeria. This has seen many lose their lives, properties, and businesses. The University of Abuja, the prestigious University of Abuja, nestled in the Federal Capital Territory in the north-central part of Nigeria, was established in 1988 but officially started running in 1990. It was set up as a dual-mode university with the mandate to run conventional and distance learning programs. The university offers diploma, undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs. Popular persons who have graduated from this institution are Kanayo O. Kanayo, actor, filmmaker and lawyer; Iman Suleiman Ibrahim, former Deputy General of NAPTIP; Muhammadu Bako III, a first-class Emir of New Karshi in Nasarawa, and many more. The University of Port Harcourt. The University of Port Harcourt is located in Choba, in Rivers State, in the south-south geopolitical zone of Nigeria. It was established in 1975 but was given university status in 1977. The University of Port Harcourt was ranked the 6th in Africa and the 1st in Nigeria by Times Higher Education in 2015. This university has graduated several notable Nigerians who are spread across several industries. Some of these people are Rita Dominic, actress; Alex Oti, former managing director of Diamond Bank; and Rotimi Amechi, a former governor of Rivers State. As it continues to run, it has promised to continue churning out great students year in and year out. Coal City University, Enugu. Named after the state's slogan, Coal City University is a not-for-profit private university nestled in Enugu State in the southeastern geopolitical zone of Nigeria. Established in 2016 with 10 faculties to its name, Coal City University currently has over 800 students. The university prides itself on offering an excellent learning experience for students, informed by up-to-date research and facilitated by a high-quality learning environment with multimedia classrooms, ultra-modern laboratories, and a modern library. Coal City University Enugu, though young, organizes an annual essay contest for secondary school students in an effort to increase awareness of current global issues among the young population. The University of Maiduguri, popularly known as UNIMAID, a university located in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, nestled in the northeastern part of Nigeria, created in 1975 by the federal government of Nigeria. UNIMAID enrolls about 25,000 students across all programs. This prestigious university has seen notable persons such as Bala Mohammed, a renowned minister and senator; Yemisi Akinbobola, a renowned journalist; Ahmed Lawan, the president of the Nigerian Senate, and so many other notable names. Bayero University, Kano, initially called Ahmadu Bello College, this citadel of education was renamed Bayero University, Kano. It was established in 1960 by the Northern Nigeria Ministry of Education. It is located in Kano State in northwestern Nigeria. Known for their great research work, Bayero University Kano research centers include the Center for Advanced Medical Research, the Center for Infectious Diseases, the African Center for Excellence in Population Health and Policy, the Center for Gender Studies, the Center for Dryland Agriculture, the Center for Biotechnology Research, the Center for Renewable Energy, and so much more. Notable alumni of the university include Ahmed Adamu, petroleum economist and lecturer; Moses Ochonu, historian and author; Ahmad Sani Yerima of Zamfara State, and so many more.
Kadaira Ahmed is a leading Nigerian journalist and media entrepreneur. She sits on the Nigerian Board of Trustees in the International Press Institute and has been recognized as one of the 5 most influential people in Nigeria's media landscape. Kadaira is a recipient of grants in support of her work in accountability journalism from leading donor agencies including the Ford Foundation, OSIWA, PLAC, and the MacArthur Foundation. She is the Executive Director of Daria Media, a company whose focus is public service journalism. She is also the Managing Director of Radio Now 95.3 FM, a radio station broadcasting out of Lagos. Radio Now exists to provide factual, unbiased, and Nigeria-focused media products that empower citizens to hold power accountable, build social consciousness, and promote nation building. Kadaira's passion for public service journalism is driven by a creed to confront inequality, injustice, and the pitfalls of identity politics. As a result, she has created, produced, and anchored programs through which she has set the agenda for national conversations on significant issues and, at times, influenced policy. She has written extensively and has been published in national and international newspapers, including the Daily Trust, The Guardian, Premium Times, and the Financial Times of London. She is a member of the Nigerian Guild of Editors and the Nigerian Institute of Directors. She started her career at the BBC in London. Kadaira has a master's in television from Goldsmiths, University of London, and a bachelor's degree from Bayero University, Kano. She is a Chevening scholar.
Good evening and welcome to the 6th day of our presidential town halls that has brought the major contenders for Nigeria's presidency face to face with the electorate that will decide who gets the top job in February. Again, I'm Kadaira Ahmed, your anchor this evening. Before we begin today's conversation, a quick announcement. We were expecting to sit down with His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his running mate, Senator Kashim Shettima of the All Progressives Congress today. They have requested that we reschedule the conversation for a later date. So today's conversation will seek to chart a way forward for Nigeria by looking at the issues that have come up during the town halls and the ongoing campaigns. We will also be hearing directly from Nigerians who've been participating in the town halls. I'm joined by a panel of individuals who are experts in their respective fields. Toyin Shonaye is the founder and CEO of Women Radio 91.7 FM, based here in Lagos. Toyin, thank you for joining us. And I know all these people, so please don't be surprised if I call all of them by their first names. You have to forgive me. Nicholas Ibiko is the head of the Northern Desk and also award-winning investigative reporter at Premium Times. Nicholas, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Gbemisola Alonge is an economist and financial journalist, but she's also a senior public policy analyst at Steers. Welcome, and thank you for saying yes to this program at such short notice. Of course, all of you as well. Me. And Abdullahi Mohammed is the author of a groundbreaking study on poverty titled The Face of Poverty, a report by the Yusuf Bala Usman Institute. He came all the way from Zaria at very short notice as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so a few things to note as we begin the conversation. Like I said, we will still be taking comments from some of the people that we've been talking to over the last 6 days. We have remote locations: Ibadan, Bayelsa, Kano, Maiduguri, Abuja, and Enugu will all be part of this conversation. And we will continue to take comments from people who are watching online if they send it to us via emails or social media platforms, but also comment at this point, not just questions, but also commentary. Okay, I want to dive straight in, Nicholas. And again, during this conversation, I have asked, and people who've also been talking to the candidates have asked about the question of unity in Nigeria. It's a conversation that people are sometimes very wary of having. It's sometimes the big elephant in the room when people are talking, because we're used to people saying the unity of Nigeria is non-negotiable, that sort of thing. And it is true that I think generally we agree that a society that is divided against itself cannot make much progress. Nonetheless, Nigeria, I think people agree, has a unity problem, and it must be addressed. You've done a lot of reporting across this country. You understand some of the issues. In a nutshell, what are you hearing regarding the unity of Nigeria that politicians that are seeking office and who also eventually form a government must take into account?
Well, like everybody, should know right now, I think that this is a very deeply divided country. If you just go on social media, for instance, you see the kind of hate speech, kind of ethnic slur that people use, against one another, and you see that it is very deeply divided. And there are also fundamental issues about unity, about fairness, about justice that have not been addressed. For instance, if we look at some of the agitation in the Southeast, for instance, we've been hearing calls about marginalization for so long, and we have seen that it has snowballed into what we have today with IPOB and other separatist groups trying to, causing mayhem there. Even in the Northwest, we see the issue of fairness. If you look at it, you begin to wonder and say, Buhari, for instance, the president is a Fulani man, but we're having Fulanis thinking that Fulanis in the Northwest see themselves as being marginalized, and that's where we have the issue of the banditry we have. So we are looking at it's a Fulani versus an Hausa thing mainly, in places like Zamfara and Katsina and all of that. So this is an issue that we, like you said, politicians like to gloss through this and say, oh, we will ensure that there's unity in the country, we will solve the problem. But there are some very difficult conversations that we have because every part of this country is fractured, in one way or the other, even among people you think are ethnically homogeneous. And you find some of this discussion about people not being carried along and all of that. So yeah.
But on the issue of sort of identity politics, so yes. Everybody that knows me knows that, I have a sort of bee in my bonnet about it. It's something that I preach against. And what people like me believe, and you're the sort of expert, the independent voice, and tell me if I'm correct, is that identity politics are actually distractions, and they're symptomatic of sort of issues around development, issues around employment, issues around lack of access to sort of opportunities and resources. And in many ways, Nigeria has become the way it is because access to state resources have been determined by either ethnicity or state of origin, federal character, all the things that sort of reinforce why your identity matters. I don't know if it makes sense to any. And please, I want this to be a free-flowing conversation. So even though you're all experts in different fields, feel free to jump in if anything strikes you. Especially if you can relate some of what we're talking about to the things that you are doing.
But like you said, identity is just, it's a camouflage for the problem behind the veil, because I think most of our problems would be solved, most of the problems of identity would be solved if people have equal opportunity, if the economy is good and people think that they are thriving wherever nobody wants to. Who becomes the president of this country really doesn't matter if I can send my kids to the school that they want, if I can feed them every day and I can travel, can go everywhere. These are the important things. And so when people don't get this thing, so they tend to blame and look at, it's an Hausa Fulani man who is doing this to me, it's an Igbo person who is doing this to me. So I think if we get fairness, justice, and we get a very thriving economy right, most of the problem will automatically be solved.
Let me bring in Abdullah here, because you spent a considerable amount of time looking at the way poverty manifests. So recently we saw the National Bureau of Statistics release harrowing figures around the number of Nigerians that are living in extreme poverty. I think the number is about 84 million, if I'm correct. I might be slightly off by a million or so. And the poverty seems to be found everywhere across this country. What did you find that was striking when you looked at the number of people who are very, very poor? And how is that poverty showing up?
Actually, poverty is really a contagious problem. And I think you can position it at the center of every other problem because of the force it radiates, and it draws onto it other factors. The identity issue, the issue of the bandits, the issue of land grabbing, the issue of desertification and climate change. All this revolves around poverty itself. When you go out during our interaction with people during the research, it is very debilitating. You find people telling you their life account, which is very, very emotional, I would say.
I mean, when we talk about the numbers, people talk about, and so it's very difficult sometimes to sort of understand how serious it is, because people say, oh, 80 million, 5 million, 10 million, this one. Can you explain to us what you found in terms of the real way poverty actually affects people? I'm interested in the stories of real people and what poverty does to people. And this was the focus of your study,
okay.
I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, there are 3 or 4 parameters we tend to calibrate poverty. We first look at how are families able to feed their children? How are they able to shelter them? How are they able to send them to school? How are they able to provide medication for them when they are sick?
So very basic things.
Yes, because away from the figures, we want to know actually from the people's mouth, what is this figure that is bandied around? What is the reality of the figure? And I think the figure is an understatement of the actual facts you come across when you relate with people who are actually feeling the pangs of poverty.
From the... yeah, go on.
Yes. From the feeding, it is necessary for them to give them breakfast to send them to school. And you have a large account of people telling you that they can't provide breakfast for their children to go to school. They live in rented apartments. They live at the glory of relatives because they can't rent somewhere to stay. They tell you how their crop production has dwindled over the years, so much so they are running this farming profession at a loss because of the climate change, because of the lack of fertilizer, and so many other factors that come into play. So
the causes of poverty are some of the things that he seems to be talking about. Mm-hmm. And I know that your expertise is, you're an economist, and so you have a wide understanding of not just the economics, but the political economy of Nigeria. Mm-hmm. What are the linkages between policy, between our economy as it currently stands, and people's standards of living? And, you know, this issue of being unable to feed your family, being unable to send them to school, all the things he broke down.
Okay, so just to illustrate, I'll use an example. In 2019, the federal government implemented a policy to shut down land borders. The immediate effect of that was that people couldn't import food. So things like rice, frozen chicken, and different other things, you know, people couldn't import them. So the ripple effect of that was that, you know, prices of these things increased. So the impact of that on families and feeding, for instance, would mean that people who used to buy chicken can no longer buy chicken and might settle for fish, might settle for eggs, for instance. So that increases the demand for eggs. And then people who used to buy eggs before, because the price of eggs would increase as a result of the higher demand, would now also not be able to afford it as well. And then that means that families would be eating food without protein. And then, you know, that exposes their families to health issues. So that's just an example. Malnutrition and things like that. So that's just an example. Other policies like I mean, anything from monetary policy, you know, how the federal government and even the CBN manages like foreign exchange, determines how many people would be able to send their kids to school, determines how many people would also even be able to do their businesses, right? So if a company who used to import things to sell is unable to anymore because the exchange rate is just really high, or I mean, if they use the parallel market rate, right? They shut down their business and they lay off all their staff. Then those people do not have incomes anymore. They can't feed their families or parents or send their kids to school.
So women are often sort of at the bottom of the bottom. And when it comes to poverty, that is no different. They are the ones that sort of seem to bear the brunt of poverty. And even though I understand the example she gave about sort of chicken and eggs, you and I, who sort of travel in rural Nigeria, understand that actually people that are even eating chicken and eggs are somewhat very well off, because we see people who are barely able to eat anything at all, you know, and eat the most outrageous. I mean, I've been to IDP camps where they're literally boiling husks of sort of grain, and that is what they use for food, right? So from the perspective of gender, and the way sort of gender is a sort of a function of the way society sort of sees gender, what are your thoughts around poverty, women, and the state of Nigeria as we speak?
Kadira, today marks 8 years, 221 days that the Chibok girls have been gone.
Right.
4 years, 275 days that Leah Sharibu has been captured. You spoke about unity. I think the biggest problem that we have, the biggest pandemic in Nigeria is poverty. And the face of poverty we know is women. So when we talk about feminization of poverty, we know we're talking about women. Inflation, insecurity, the Iyabume in Abeokuta cannot even afford to put food on the table anymore. We don't eat eggs anymore. The woman in Benin, who is the breadwinner of the family, cannot even afford to feed. You spoke about IDP camps. We know there is now sex. We don't talk about sex for grades anymore.
Now sex for food.
Sex for food. So the woman at the IDP camps has to sell her body to feed her husband, and the children. Even Russia, that is fighting war, something is still unifying them. I think whoever becomes the next president of Nigeria really needs to work on the issue of insecurity, inflation. We can't just fathom it. Today, diesel was sold for 830 naira. Last year, September, it was 230 naira or thereabouts. Something is not working. And it's the women. I'm not saying men do not struggle, but it is the women who feel this more. The children now have to do all sorts of activities. The parents, mothers have to look away because they just wait for the children to bring in the money, and we know where the money comes from.
Okay, and go on.
So it's a bigger issue
than what
we're just glossing over it. It's a bigger issue. Insecurity has made poverty something else. Everybody is
And there are
poor.
those who suggest that poverty has fundamentally altered who we are as a people. Fundamentally, from our values to sort of the things that we focus on, etc., etc. And that's a conversation I will dive into after we speak to the people in Ibadan. Ibadan, good evening.
You're welcome to the University of Ibadan, and we're definitely following this discussion very, very keenly. And we have some students here who are ready to ask us, the panelists, there are some questions that bother on some of the issues bothering us in Nigeria. Okay, by the way, my name is Nero. I'll start off with
Nero, if you can hear me, Nero. Essentially, we welcome questions, but because this is our 6th show, we're also hoping they can tell us what they hope to see in the next government and what are the things they're looking for in the people that they want to elect, or what will help them decide who they are going to elect into office.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm pretty sure that Akere will be able to tell us what he hopes to see from the next president of the country. Akere?
Okay, good evening. My name is Akere Sonny Igbeye. I'm a student of Electrical and Electronics Engineering Department at the University of Ibadan. Okay, so what I would like to see in the candidates that will have my votes, two things. First of all, empathy. Recently, in the current political space, we found that our politicians have lost touch with the reality of Nigerians. So I feel empathy, a candidate that feels empathy towards the situation of Nigerians. Secondly, the willingness to fight corruption. So today in Nigeria, it's no secret that one of the fundamental issues facing Nigeria is the issue of corruption. However, this current administration, in my own point of view, I wouldn't call, okay, so taking President Muhammadu Buhari, for example, I wouldn't necessarily say he's a corrupt person. However, his willingness to tackle the issue of corruption in Nigeria is next to nothing. So a candidate that has the will to fight corruption will have my vote. Thank you.
Okay, and that was Akere there, and we're going to go to another student who also has a contribution to make.
Good evening. My name is Adekola Emmanuel Adebowale from English department. My contribution goes to the sector of security. Now, Nigeria now has become a very dangerous zone for tourists and people who might even want to create businesses, thereby leaving us with no jobs. So I hope that the next president would look into equipping our military men properly and taking care of these soldiers, taking care of the soldiers at war, at least to minimize the issues of mutiny and desertion. Though we know that we are supposed to be throwing questions at the presidential candidates, but maybe it got cold feet.
They are not presidential candidates here.
Another thing
Unless you people are running for government, I did not tell me. Eh?
Another thing is that we need someone who will take education seriously. Like, how would a president be on the seat and allow students to be at home for more than 8 months? That is too appalling, okay, for a country that wants to grow. Now, youth are really on the verge, and we are going to vote for who we believe, by logic, that is going to do well. But we hope that whoever we vote for will do the right thing. We just hope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, the line is a little... Okay. Thank you very much, Ibadan. On the question of security, I want to step it aside for a bit because we have a security expert joining us a little bit later. But when you look at the things that students are asking for, starting, let's say, maybe with empathy, how do we decide when we're looking at a candidate whether he's going to end up being a president that has empathy or not? How do you judge empathy? You understand what I'm saying? Because some of the difficulties sometimes for people when they go to the votes, because they tend to all say the same thing. So, I'm happy for anybody to jump in here that has an idea. I believe empathy is important. If you don't feel the pain of your people, it's very difficult for you to sort of understand the urgency of the work you have to do. And I suspect that Nigeria is at a place where everything is now really urgent and has to be dealt with urgently. Mm-hmm. So how do we know if a leader is likely to be to have empathy for Nigerians?
Okay. Well, I think we can have a fairly good guess of who will be empathetic and who would not by looking at their antecedents. So we have to look at someone's history, because if you look at the age of those run-ins, and perhaps some of the, youngest front-runner is in their 60s. At that age, people are most likely not going to change from who they are. I think they have passed that stage. So you just look at what they have done. Some of them have held public offices in the past. So when they held the previous offices, were they people that approach governance with empathy? So we have to look at their history. I think that is the best mirror for us to judge who will be empathetic and who will not. If someone was mean and kept people at home for several years, or closed hospitals for several years, for several months, or someone was breaking down shanties and where people should have lived, or someone was clearing off market women from where they make the daily struggle. Someone was also aiding people who tax market women indiscriminately and all of that. So when we look at their history and how they have governed in the past, then we should be able to tell if we elect you into office, if you govern with empathy, or if you just come there and just become one mean fellow.
Okay. And Joan, I knew you wanted to speak, but before you do, let me throw something out so that you wrap it all together. Empathy is good, feeling people's pains. But should there also be a line? Do you also want a leader who sort of jumps when people cry, he leaves everything he's doing, he jettisons policy, and responds almost instantly?
There's nothing wrong in crying, Kaderia, but I feel that since 1999 Republic, the men have been administering Nigeria, and we know where it has taken us. I think a president who, looking at his antecedents, that has worked with women is important, because we have seen the countries where women have governed. Germany is one, for instance. Germany is a powerhouse, and we knew what happened when a woman led Germany. We've seen Rwanda as well. What is happening in Rwanda?
Are you saying you're seeing a correlation between empathy and gender? Is that what I'm hearing?
There is a correlation. If you're not stuck in your ways and you believe that inclusion, because if you think of the fact that, look, I've handled it, men have handled it for so long, and we've seen where it's taken us to. Including women and changing your mindset and allowing women to work with you would definitely, I think somebody who has worked with women, who will be sympathetic and empathetic as well, including women in the governance matters. And going back to what he said, we need to look at the antecedents of what they have done in the past. If you look at Rwanda, Kadria, men are there, but the women in politics have made things work in that country. So for me, it's important that you not only look at the problems you have, you also look at the opportunities to work with other people. A president that will be stuck in his mind, look, it's a fact that a woman cannot be president of Nigeria in 2023. It's a fact, right?
Sadly.
It's a fact. It's sad, but it's a fact, and we have to accept it. It's a fact that a woman cannot be the vice president of Nigeria come 2023. But the number one democratic state in the world that we have fashioned our governance after has a woman as a vice president. That tells me that something will work. So that president, and we need to hold them responsible, Kadera, that president has to say that when I come into power, I'm going to listen to all sides of the story. We're going to try and do things differently. So empathy does matter.
Okay, let me go into sort of two other issues that were raised from the people in Ibadan, and I think the two of you are probably best positioned to talk about this. The issue of the fight against corruption. In talking about your research on poverty, you talked, for example, about the role that climate change has sort of played in pauperizing populations. Yeah. I'm wondering whether your research brought up anything at all about the way governance is done and corruption and the impact it has had on poverty in the land. And if it has, please share what you found out. And then I want to sort of move on to her to talk about corruption from the sort of economic point of view, as an economic crime, and the way we sort of deal with it, and what your research is showing around what works and what doesn't work.
Well, I could say we looked at corruption And we look at it, how it has cascaded from the top to the bottom, how people are feeling the corruption of the leaders at the top, what they are supposed to do that they failed to do, or they did it wrongly, being nepotic, being corrupt in terms of providing them with the necessary health care, in terms of providing them with education, in terms of providing them with the basic infrastructure. Actually, corruption plays an important role in that aspect. But the category of people we mostly interviewed are people at the lower level of society, and they are not talking about the high-level corruption among government officials.
What sort of corruption are they focused on?
They are concerned about their livelihood. How can their livelihoods be improved?
You're saying to me they are eking out a living, so much so that all of their attention is actually on just how to survive. That they don't even have time to think politics or to think leaders or anything.
Their basic necessities of life is what they are focusing on. And they don't look up to high-level corruption. They are concerned about how to make a living. For example, a farmer, he doesn't know what really happens with the situation of fertilizer. All he wants is that the fertilizer should be affordable for him. The woman is concerned about the cost of transport for what she is going to buy so that she comes and sell as a petty trader. When the transport is high, it takes a percentage out of the profit and it eats her out of business. So this peripheral aspects of living has shielded them from seeing what the elites do.
Right.
So
that's an interesting insight, and I want to come back to it when we sort of start the conversation to talk about sort of the how can politics, how can we get them to then make the correlation between their lives and what is happening in the political space. But I don't want to dive into that quite yet because I want to have a conversation around corruption and the economy. In the work that you're doing, to what extent are you finding that there's a direct correlation between how badly Nigeria is doing and corrupt practices?
It's very directly correlated. So one main thing that has been top of mind for many Nigerians is the crude oil theft, right? So we're discovering pipelines that have never, like, no one even knew existed. Well, maybe they did, but just chose not to say anything about it. And that has had a direct impact on Nigerians. Today, crude oil prices are over 100 barrels per day. Yet, Nigeria is not earning enough. No income has been remitted to the federal government, to the federation account this year because we're spending too much on fuel subsidies because we're not producing enough. So what that happened this year alone, what we've seen and what the World Bank reported is that Nigeria has spent more on subsidies than education, healthcare, and infrastructure combined.
Please, just repeat that again.
So the Nigerian government has spent more on subsidies than healthcare, education, and infrastructure combined this year alone. So that means that because, and the World Bank even highlighted that only 4% of Nigeria's poor actually benefits from these fuel subsidies. So only 4 people are benefiting from the fact that you're depriving them of healthcare, you're depriving them of education and infrastructure. Transportation is harder. People can't move from one place to the other. And even in the multidimensional poverty report, right, some of the main issues that Nigerians had was, the biggest deprivation or area of deprivation for poor people is access to cooking, good and clean cooking fuels, right? Half of Nigeria's poor do not have access to clean fuels, so they're using firewood to cook. And McKinsey has recorded that over 600,000 Nigerians die annually because they use firewood and just this dirty. So the fact that they're poor and the fact that the government isn't doing the right thing is moving people, not just depriving people of their basic needs, but moving them closer to death because of what they have to do, to survive. Another area of corruption is just how the money is spent, right? leakages in the budget. If you look at the Nigerian federal government's budget today, most of the money this year, over 60%, has gone to either, servicing debts and paying salaries. So the Nigerian government is structured in such a way that, the federal government has very optimistic revenue plans. So the government wants to earn so much from all revenue, yet they do not investigate the theft issue, and we're not even making enough. So they want to earn so much from taxes. So they increase taxes and things like that. And Nigerians suffer for it. And then at the end of the day, rather than use these, the income that they've gotten on things like welfare, on things like education and healthcare that would actually help Nigerians, they use it on paying salaries to civil servants. And at the end of the day, no Nigerian is benefiting from it. Another area where we're seeing corruption manifest is someone has spoken about multiple taxation for even business owners, right? So what's the likelihood of getting a permit as a business owner when you want to start businesses in Nigeria? How many hands do you have to, fill with money before you can actually get your permits? As a market woman, Iyabisi that is roasting boli in the market, how many 500 nairas does she need to pay to illegal tax officers before they can allow her to actually just put her stool and her charcoal?
You've raised a lot of issues, and I want to try and see if we can link them directly to some of the campaigns that are going on, because this is, after all, the sort of sixth program of the candidates, and we're talking about how these things are related to elections and governance and how we choose leaders. But before we do, I want to take a remote location. Good evening, Maiduguri. Right, okay, so I'm told that Maiduguri is not quite ready. So let me just carry on with this conversation. Nicholas, you heard me ask her to repeat something. I won't lie, I had not done the number. So I was shocked for her to say that subsidy, right, is bigger than the budget for healthcare, education, and was it infrastructure combined. And yet, I've sat down with candidates, but also heard other candidates who say they are pro-people. And because they are pro-people, they are not going to remove subsidy. What are the conversations among regular Nigerians? Do they understand the damage that subsidy is doing, or at least on paper it is taken away from them? Do they even understand what subsidy is? And what are you hearing as you move around the country reporting? Do Nigerians get it? Is it a factor in the conversations that they're having about who to elect and who not to elect, or not?
Yeah, what I hear is that is the misinformation that, of course, you hear, these are the people that have been on this show, perhaps the Nigerian elite, either political elite or economic elite, and these are or intellectual elite. These are the misinformation that they have repeated over the years, and you find that it has flowed.
What is the misinformation?
The misinformation is that subsidy is to help, is for the benefit of the poor
people, right?
Of the poor people. But we have seen, as research study has shown, that, like you said, only 4% of the poor Nigerians are enjoying. So many Nigerians.
So subsidy is really for middle class and upper class Nigerians, yeah. And the people who steal the balance of it. Right.
So when many Nigerians hear that, oh, they are going to scrap subsidy, the first thing that comes to the mind is, oh, I'm going to pay times X amount of money to get to my place of work. Right. I'm going to, the cost of stuff is going to skyrocket. And you see that fear in them saying, because that uncertainty, people don't know what will happen. And you see that is why we also have, of course, if subsidy is taken out, maybe there will be some kind of increase anyway. But I think that we just spoke about empathy, that a government with empathy should be able to come up with policy to cushion that shock, so that people don't get the direct blow from taking it out completely.
And often when we talk subsidy, people are talking about subsidy when it comes to petroleum, right?
Yes,
oil.
yes, yeah.
But there are other forms of subsidy, and we can dive in a little bit into that. But Maiduguri is ready. Good evening, Maiduguri. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. Good evening, Nigeria. You're welcome to University of Maiduguri. I am Musa Osman, standing here with the students of the university. And we have a number of comments on security, which we are going to defer till later. Hope we'll have the opportunity to do that.
No, you
But
can,
for now,
you can ask the questions. Let's take note of them because we may not be able to come back to you. So best to ask them now. And then when the security expert gets here, we can deal with them along with the issues raised in Ibadan.
okay, we will now take two comments on the economy and poverty first. Abakar?
Good evening, my name is Abubakar Sani Sabu, Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I want to raise an issue that I want to see in the leader being addressing. The issue, Nigerian youth occupy more than half of the population of this country. And there is also a high very dependency ratio in the country at 82.2 dependents per 100 non-dependents. Some countries, advanced countries, has take advantage of that, especially those like Japan and Korea, taking advantage of youth. And so I want a leader that will divert, not always deciding on the resources we have in Nigeria, but investing more in youth that will help grow the economic growth of the country, like most especially the SMEs. More example is that technology, like that of technology, the ones that created Paystack, and that of, let's say, the upcoming Bitcoin, that of Abubakar Khalil from Kaduna. When government believe in those youth, directing their energy to youth to grow the economy, I think is that kind of a leader we all want in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now take a comment from Saminaka on poverty. Saminaka.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Saminaka Aminu John. I'm from the Department of Sociology, Anthropology. Mrs. Gadiri, you made your female guest speaker make mention of poverty, and I would like to express more on how the next coming president will be able to tackle poverty. Now, poverty is a very big stigma in West Africa and also in Nigeria. Now, for us to promote a better quality of life from the young entrepreneur and also market women and also men who are striving to put food on their table, first of all, we need to have a good fiscal policy in our economic terrain, and also the political policies that are going to be preferred in our country need to be good and be able to sustain the life of every individual in Nigeria. Another thing is that my friend here, he talked about youth being able to do something for themselves and grow the economy. There's a lot of potential in the youth, and I feel that me, as one of them, can contribute more to a lot of industries that our leaders or the elite are not giving us a better space for us to work more and show more effect. There's a lot of power and energy in youth. And if the next president can show more light for you to express themselves in entrepreneurial skill and all the skill they've achieved, for them to get more income and make a cash flow in the country, I think I'll have a good, better leader like that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Maiduguri. We don't have a lot of time to break, so I'm wondering if there are people in the hall who want to make a comment before we go to the break. Anybody? Otherwise, we'll use the next 5 minutes to wrap. Okay. We have a few minutes before we go to elections. I mean, Nigeria has a very youthful population, and listening to some of them talk there about wanting leaders who sort of see that as a resource, leaders who understand that you're in a tech world, etc., etc. Any of you surprised that we've ended up with a field that is largely dominated by old men, given the fact that we have a youthful population?
I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
Subsidy. Sorry, I have to take us back to subsidy.
Okay.
Subsidy is not sustainable based on the data my sister has given us. Look, petrol subsidy on its own, we can see what has happened to petrol subsidy. The big men buy the petrol at a cost that is not so expensive. They take it out of Nigeria, they go sell it at huge sums, and then we're suffering in Nigeria. And the woman...
And they collect the subsidy in
they collect the
Nigeria.
subsidy here. And the ordinary woman at the grassroots level in the villages is unable to even buy anything. We can't transport food from one end to the other. You and I know what petrol does to us in Nigeria. So subsidy is not sustainable. We know that. And I'm just wondering what we need to do, what the new government, the incoming, the 2023 government is going to do.
Well, this government has already said subsidy is going off. So whoever comes in is going to inherit a decision that has been taken.
A decision that has been taken, but also a decision that needs to be looked at.
Okay.
Do they really know what they're doing?
Do they really know what they are doing? What a question. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll carry on with the conversation around what we've heard in the last 5 conversations we've had, and what voters are saying they want to see in the next leader or the next president of Nigeria. Don't go away.
Daria Media, in association with Cabal Entertainment, presents The Candidates, a presidential town hall meeting series where the presidential candidates of the 6 leading political parties tell us about their plans for the country. Join Kadaria Ahmed as she leads us into the world of these candidates from the 17th to the 23rd of November 2022. This very important program will be streamed on FRCN, Radio Now, DSTV, NTA, Facebook, YouTube, and more. This is a town hall meeting you shouldn't miss. Tune in. Let's hear from the candidates.
Choosing where to study is one of the biggest decisions you will make in life. So, it is important to get it right. At Coal City University, Enugu, Nigeria, we pride ourselves on providing students a stable academic calendar and education of international standards. Coal City University gives students incredible personal attention and support. You can enroll in our regular programs and obtain a degree exclusively awarded by Coal City University. Alternatively, you can enroll in our International Pathway programs, which will enable you earn 2 degrees in 4 years from Coal City University and Delaware State University, United States. Visit www.ccu.edu.ng. Coal City University, education for self-actualization.
Welcome back. You are watching a conversation on the way forward for Nigeria, brought to you off the back of a conversation with the candidates who are vying to become the president of Nigeria in 2023. This program is brought to you with the support of the MacArthur Foundation, the Nigeria Television Authority, FRCN, Radio Now, Emmanuel Chapel, Zikoko Citizen, Silverbird Television, Trust TV, Injenje Media, News Central Television, Plus TV, Kaftan TV, YouTube, Out There Media, Amede, and a few more that we will talk about before the program is over. Okay, so before the break, I'd started talking about the sizable population of young people who estimate is about 70% of the population, a little bit over 70% of the population is under 30, I think. And the questions from some of them regarding wanting a president who is sensitive to the fact that they are actually a resource that can be utilized to drive development in this country, etc., etc. And the temptation is to sort of dive straight into that conversation around what they are and everything. But Tom, I want to come to you. Because often those statistics are not broken down by sex. And so we tend to focus on what has been going on with young men and not necessarily the sort of shortcomings for young women. Talk to us a little bit about what young women, that's part of that segment, what is going on with them and the impact that has on our ability to grow and develop as a country?
Let me talk about the United Kingdom. They keep inviting young people to come and work because they know that the young people are capable and competent, and it helps the old population.
The aging population.
The aging population.
Right.
The same is here in Nigeria. If the environment is conducive, you and I know what the young people do in our lives. 90% of the workforce at Women Radio are by young people, and I've seen them here. They just need an enabling environment. If they are given an enabling environment, electricity, good roads, good IT, transportation, they will thrive. Now, you and I know, I wonder what's going to happen to us, what's going to happen to them, because we are even struggling to survive. So we need somebody who will come in and understand that I can work with young people. I can also listen to what they have to offer because they are able and they are competent.
From a structural point of view, if I may, Gbemisola, and I turn to you because I know you work with numbers and you sort of data is at your fingertips. This people keep talking about utilizing young people, gingering up young people. In practical terms, what does that mean? What does one have to do? Countries that have sort of taken advantage of a youth population, what have they done to ensure that young people do all the things that Tomu said they need to do?
Yeah, I'll give an example of India. This year, India surpassed the UK as the 5th largest economy in the world. And one of the ways that they did that was by attracting investors into the country. And what these investors did, because India is a largely populated country, right? So what they did was attract businesses that can employ its youth, right? And before even doing that, India, some people would say, is the customer service center of the world. And that's because Indian companies, like they just have, they're big on business process outsourcing. So you have large offices that just basically hire people to be customer service centers for the rest of the world, like different conglomerates across the world. So that's India's way of using or putting its large population to good use, right? They educated the people, focused on vocational education, focused on even as simple as English education, how to pick up a phone call and respond to people. And that's how they were able to attract people. So they didn't...
It's interesting you said India because, and my memory of this is very vague. So if people are fact-checking me, please forgive me. But I think India in the 1990s was exactly where Nigeria is today. When it comes to things like deficits in budget, deficit in trade, and sort of just spending more than you are earning and being in debt and all of that. And yet we're now talking about them being the 5th largest economy in the world. People say this was largely driven because they skilled up their young people and they focused on education. A lot of CEOs now of some of the biggest tech companies in the world are all Indian. And so when you sort of hear about that, and Nicholas, come in here, please. You look at Nigeria. I mean, in the north, for example, where I come from, even the ability to read and write is a problem. Literacy rates that range as high as 90% in some places. So when you live in an environment like that, how do you make that transition from sort of that kind of place to a place where your young people have the skills that will attract industry, attract business, and they're able to look after themselves? And what should people, the leader who can do this is who? And when I say who, I'm not asking for a name. I'm asking what are the characteristics of a leader who can do this? Because again, you know, we're talking the candidates and we're talking about the person that people should elect in 2023 February to become the leader of this country. And in fact, indeed, is it a national job? Or are we putting too much emphasis on the center?
Well,
many questions, I know, sorry.
Okay, but I mean, I think first it's a national job, but it's also a state, a job that also deals with all the other tiers of government as well, the local government, and because what we need to do first is to look at our education. Apart from, you can see that Nigeria basically have these millions of students, children out of school. We need to get people basic education, because what we find out is that most Nigerians don't even have basic education. So the state, whoever becomes the president needs to work with local government, needs to work with state government, and people will have to get basic education right. Mm-hmm. Before we get to where India is today, we can't just jump the gun. We have to get basic education right first. So the leader who has to do that has to make sure that that is done. Now, from there, then there has to also be opportunities for young people who really want to study more, who want to further their education. And it's strange to hear, but we see a lot of people drop out of school these days in Nigeria because they can't afford to pay school fees. Mm-hmm. So are we going to, do we have a program in place that for somebody who is going to perhaps give loan to students and for education, and so that they can complete their school? So that leader has to look at that very well. The person who has to bring us to that level of where India is today has to take education seriously. And we have to start from basic education first.
Malam Abdullah, basic education. Yes. When you were talking about the research you conducted, you were very clear that the people you talked to were the poorest of the poor, people who are just barely eking out a living.
Yes.
Did you find that there was any conversation there around going to school? Do the children go to school? If they go to school, what sort of school do they go to? Do the parents want their kids to go to school? Are they aware of the importance of education in sort of taking them out of poverty?
Yes, they are very keen about sending their kids to school. But the major impediment towards sending their kids to school is the financial aspect associated with sending the kids to school. Some of the account we came across is a family couldn't afford to buy school uniform for the kids to start the basic education in a free education system. They couldn't afford to.
So it was a free school, but
yes,
they couldn't go because they couldn't afford uniform.
Enroll them with the basic school uniform. So the basic even is lacking. And the cumulative of these basics has led to hopelessness of the system. Right. And what I want these aspirants to really take note of is there is going to be serious voter apathy regarding voting, regarding participating in election, because what we have experienced over the years is that the people have realized that those seeking for public offices do not factor them into consideration as people worthy of consideration, as people worthy of any planning towards alleviating their predicament. So this is
They're not seeing a correlation between government and their lives.
Yes.
Basically.
They don't see it because they are living in a hopeless situation. Because when you tell them that their hope lies in electing a good leader, they will show you one leader from within them who they were able to elect, and he transits class and then becomes something else.
And forgets about them.
Forgets about them.
Right.
He is not held accountable for what he is supposed to do.
We must have that conversation after we speak to the people in Kano. Hello, Bayero University. Good evening.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to Kano State. My name is Stephen Enoch, and we are at Bayero University, Kano. Today we have Abba Idris and Maria Shaibu, who are ready to, share their opinion on the kind of president they want for Nigeria. Let's start with Abba Idris. Abba?
Okay, good evening. My name is Abba Musa Idris from Bayero University, Kano.
Well, let me start by begging to differ about the description given to poverty at the first place. Well, I think the definition, or rather the description of poverty, is beyond the way it is described as lack of having chickens or eggs on our food or something of that nature. Poverty in the part of where we live, you can find people who have never begged are now begging. People do not have even the morsels of food that they can, eat. So I think when talking about poverty, there is a need to look at the basic factor of what poverty actually means. That's number one. And then going to the type of the leader that we are dreaming to have in this country, I think there are so many dreams that we have been having. The first one, we need a leader who can make our country a knowledge-driven country, because the world is advancing and many countries have been producing knowledge where you can have scholarship and study online, or sometimes you can go in flesh to study in their different.
I think we had quite enough from him. Is a bit of a shame that actually his mic failed, but I think he said enough there. And the issue of poverty, I think he kind of misunderstood. What you were giving was trying to understand how this thing sometimes cascades. So I think he's talked about how bad things are. And I think it's also true, though, to note that poverty differs across this country, right? So depending on where you are, rural poverty is now becoming really, really quite horrific. But I thought we could respond to two other things that he talked about. Wanting a leader that, believes in building a knowledge-based economy. Relate it to the young man in Ibadan who was talking about a tech-driven country. But also a person who is willing to fight corruption. So the question I asked earlier about how do you decide who has empathy? How do you decide who the leader is that is willing to fight corruption? We've seen many promises before, right, around the fight against corruption. I mean, it hasn't quite translated in the way Nigerians thought it would. We've seen people talk about innovation and tech and all that. Again, it hasn't happened. How do we know?
Well, again, one has to look at some of these ideas, because everybody.
Some of the people contesting, I know you talked about antecedents, have never actually been in government, for example.
So everybody, for instance, can parrot, I will fight corruption when I get there, I will do that. But I think if you look at where other places in history that corruption has been fought successfully, of course, there is no place that is 100% corrupt, free. But we'll see that we have to take corruption from this idea of you see one man who is a clean person. And I think that is the problem with, that was why the fight against fight against corruption of the Buhari government has not been as successful as we hope it will. Because he was this person, Mr. Squeaky Clean, who was going to fight corruption, rather than empowering the institutions that will fight corruption.
But is this not a very Nigerian problem? Because even in this election circle, I've sat down with people where I've said, how are you going to do something, right? And their answer is, we're different, so we're going to do it differently. So this notion that of a messiah, of one person who's sort of so great, so good, that single-handedly they can sort of transform systemic issues, systemic rot, systemic problems. What do voters need to do to sort of address those issues and not be disappointed?
I'd like to talk about a system that I spoke about earlier, about using women. Because we tried it in Nigeria. We probably didn't realize that we tried it in Nigeria and it worked. There's a lady who coordinated the economy of Nigeria. And she was also the Minister for Finance at some point in time. That's Okonjo-Iweala. And at that time, she must have done something right, because the
But
economy.
did she, Towa, I'm going to push you on this. Did
Yeah.
she do something right because she was a woman or because she was competent? Because we've also
No.
had
No,
other
no,
women
no, I'm-
who've done, even now we have women who are doing outrageous stuff, right?
Kadria, what I don't even, we won't go there because for every woman that goes wrong, you have millions of men that do it
but that's,
wrong. So
that's
let me
why I'm
answer
wondering
you.
whether
Let me
your
answer
argument is just a
Okonjo
gender.
Iweala
Yes.
performed.
Yes.
Whoever put her there for 2 administrations, they must realize that she did something positive.
Yes.
She worked with Goodluck, she worked with Obasanjo.
Yes.
Now,
The argument
From-
though is
from
that
there,
did
from-
she do well because she
She
was
did-
a woman or because she was competent?
she was competent and she was a woman. Whoever put her there realized that it was a woman and she could deliver.
Right.
Others would have looked away. They would have put men there knowing that
Right,
the woman
that's
could
the point
deliver.
you are making.
Now, the
Okay,
other administrations, one way or the other, if you notice from after Okonjo Iweala, we've had women. There probably are something the men understand in the women that we don't know. They're putting the women there. So for me, corruption is everywhere, including UK and the US. But they make sure that they deliver. They provide infrastructure. They provide services that the people want. Listen, if the economy is good, if there is uninterrupted electricity supply in Nigeria, I would not bat my eyelid about somebody stealing. I just want that electricity to work and I'll pay for it. I'll use an example of the train that works between Lagos and Abeokuta and Ibadan, because I apply that route every day. The train system works well, but whoever put that system there has given room for corruption. You can't pay online. You cannot pay online. You have to pay with cash.
Right.
The train is working. It comes on time, but they have put in a system at the beginning for corruption to thrive. So for me, you just need somebody that understands the way a system will work. I don't need a human being. Nope. He said it. Is that one man that is corrupt-free? We just need somebody that understands, let me put a mechanism in place. Let the rule of law work in Nigeria.
But isn't it the fact, and we have to take a break quickly after this, but isn't it the fact that sometimes the reason why these gaps exist is precisely because people want to exploit them? And so when you say they should put in place, if they put in place, they put themselves out of business. And that has been the conundrum in Nigeria,
Because Kadiria, we're selfish. You spoke about young people. Can I just quickly say that, look, we are losing the good young people. We're building young people and sending them out of Nigeria. The brain drain will continue to happen until we understand that we need to involve young people to serve. We have ministries of youth, and it's men and women that are in their 60s that are heading ministries of youth. Are we saying young people can't do these things?
Are we saying young people can't do these things? We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will try and dive into the issue of security, or rather insecurity. Don't go away.
Daria Media, in association with Cabal Entertainment, presents The Candidates, a presidential town hall meeting series where the presidential candidates of the 6 leading political parties tell us about their plans for the country. Join Kadaria Ahmed as she leads us into the world of these candidates from the 17th to the 23rd of November 2022. This very important program will be streamed on FRCN, Radio Now, DSTV, NTA, Facebook, YouTube, and more. This is a town hall meeting you shouldn't miss. Tune in. Let's hear from the candidates.
Choosing where to study is one of the biggest decisions you will make in life. So, it is important to get it right. At Coal City University, Enugu, Nigeria, we pride ourselves on providing students a stable academic calendar and education of international standards. Coal City University gives students incredible personal attention and support. You can enroll in our regular programs and obtain a degree exclusively awarded by Coal City University. Alternatively, you can enroll in our International Pathway programs, which will enable you earn 2 degrees in 4 years from Coal City University and and Delaware State University, United States. Visit www.ccu.edu.ng. Coal City University, education for self-actualization.
Welcome back. You are watching a conversation about the way forward for Nigeria as we begin the search for our next president and vice president. And this is off the back of the conversations with the candidates that have been trying or to convince Nigerians to vote for them in February 2023. During the break, we said goodbye to Mr. Nicholas Ibikwe, who came here to share his vast experience in reporting Nigeria with sort of all the issues we've discussed. But I'm happy to say that we are now welcoming Dr. Kabiru Adamu, who is the CEO and founder of Beacon Consulting, considered a security expert, actually, in many ways. And thank you so much for taking the trouble to come all the way from Abuja to be part of this conversation. We've been sort of putting off the security conversation, waiting for you, because everybody here is an expert in a particular area. And I thought we should start with the person who's sort of totally deeply, in the security issues or insecurity issues facing Nigeria. Even 5 years ago, security in Nigeria was better than it is today. What we seem to have is that every day things are deteriorating. Can you give us an overview of the state of insecurity or the state of security in Nigeria today? And if you like, maybe speak to us broadly about the factors and how they perhaps feed insecurity, the economic issues, et cetera, or is it one of those chicken and egg situations? Yeah.
Thank you, Kadiria. You were very kind with your words. I'm honored to be here and to share my views on security. I like using data because data tells you in a very clear way where we are. Have we made progress or have we gone back? Now, at the end of the month of October, about 9,000 persons have died in Nigeria between January and the month of October. If you compare that with what happened last year, we're not making progress, unfortunately. But if you take it back to 2014, when about 13,000 persons died in that year, then we've made some progress. We're reducing.
So are we going back and forth, or what is going on? Okay.
Exactly. 2014 so far has been the year with the highest number of fatalities in Nigeria. And that was singly because of the activities of one group, that is the Jamaat al-Ahl-Sunnah al-Dawati wal-Jihad. You remember it was that year?
Known as the common name
Boko Haram.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was that year that it acquired the infamous title of being the world's deadliest terrorist group. But then since that year, we've seen a reduction in the number of fatalities from that group. So progress is being made in certain areas. Unfortunately, from that period up until now, there have been new threat elements that have emerged. One of them is banditry. Now, speaking about 2023 and what the candidates I'm hoping to hear, currently we don't have a framework for addressing banditry. States that have the banditry challenge are responding to it in the manner that they feel they can't respond to it. But the federal government hasn't provided a framework. Now, if we remember that exclusive security remains in the exclusive list, one would have thought it would be the responsibility of the federal government to put forward a framework that would allow the state government to say, okay, within that framework, this is where we can key in.
Why do frameworks matter? Because sometimes, when we're having these conversations, particularly because we're speaking to regular people, they're not sitting in security meetings and understanding what that means. So what is a framework? Why must it differ depending on what you are fighting? And how come we don't have one for specifically fighting banditries in the Northwest?
Now, in this instance, you've got a group of gunmen who are domiciled in a forested area. Now, that forested area traverses roughly about 5 states. Now, it's important, if you've got a framework, those 5 states would key in their policies for fighting that challenge around what the framework seeks to achieve.
So a framework is what? A plan of action that
that
has like an umbrella?
Exactly.
Okay.
It allows everyone who wants to key in to say, okay, keying into it, but then geared towards the same objective. In this instance, addressing banditry. You can use what the Southwest has done in the Amotekun vigilante group as an example.
So that's a framework. And based on that, they came up with
they came together, agreed around a particular objective, and then each state now went ahead to create a body. You don't have that in the Northwest as an example. And the challenge is that they are dealing with the same problem. You've got sometimes when the intensity of the counter F, whatever it is, I don't want to give it a name because it doesn't exist. If the intensity is high in Zamfara, they move from Zamfara and come to Katsina. If it's high in Katsina, they move from Katsina and come to Kaduna. So you've got them moving around. I'm talking of the gunmen now. But we don't have a common approach that would tie all these states to deal with that particular challenge.
People, I mean, sure, they're listening. We're not security experts. And I know that because my state is very much affected. I'm from Zamfara.
And I know that you did a documentary, a beautiful one actually.
I did, yes. And I remember like one of the things that I was always puzzled by was why they don't sort of attack them simultaneously. Because you know they're going to run from one place of attacking to the other. And it seems like just common sense. So do we have like a fundamental problem among sort of, or with our security architecture and our security services? Or what is it exactly? Because some things seem just commonsensical to me and many others.
Time would not allow us to even start discussing the challenges, but there are three arms of government, and each of them, unfortunately, has a responsibility to play here. Part of the challenge is that we don't have laws for some of the offenses that even exist.
They are new.
Not necessarily. Insurgency is not new, but I mean, we don't even have a law that is very clear for addressing insurgency. We have a terrorism act, but that we created as a result of pressure from the outside world. It doesn't really take into consideration the local requirement for a terrorism prevention act. And I say this with all sense of responsibility. The terrorism threat is local. It starts from the grassroots. If you have the framing of the law that sees it from a foreign perspective, in other words, it's ideological, it does not recognize the root causes that lead to terrorism. And unfortunately, even the counter-terrorism campaign, it will be done in a manner that you and I cannot relate to. I would like a situation, and that's what I'm hoping to hear from the candidates, where the market woman can key into our counter-terrorism campaign. I'll be very surprised if any of us here is aware of some of the contents of the Terrorism Prevention Act, and most of us here are very educated. So what of the woman in the market? What of the student in school? Recently, the security forces listed a number of persons that they have classified as terrorist bandits or whatever. How many of us, for instance, have taken the time to look at those images and say, okay, I've seen Turji as an example. I know him. I've seen him on certain publications, and then this is the phone number I can call if I have any information regarding him. Not many of us can relate to that. So we do have a counter-terrorism strategy that Nigerians cannot even relate to because it's framed from, frankly, a foreign perspective. I would like that to be changed to a situation where each of us as Nigerians can relate to that counter-terrorism strategy and then support its implementation. We're not there yet, unfortunately.
Okay, and we will talk a little bit more about this, but Enugu is on the line. Hello, Enugu.
Good. From Coal City University, Enugu, Nigeria. I am a former Ajumobi. And we have students here who are very ready to make their contributions. They are concerned about certain things they want to see from the candidates who will possibly be president of Nigeria next year. I have Chimerem and Jonathan here to make their contributions. Chimerem.
Good evening. My name is Chimerem Ajinta from the Department of Computer Science in Coal City University. Nigeria has faced a series of crises ranging from the flood to unemployment, poverty, and even insecurity, like those in the north, and the attacks in Enugu yesterday and today. and our government hasn't addressed these issues. So I would like to see a president, I would like to have a president that will address these issues, that is sane, that will come around and speak about these issues, tell Nigerians their plans on actions or what they want to do to fix these issues, and are available to talk to Nigerians as often as these issues arise. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Ani from the Department of Microbiology, Coast State University. So, firstly, I would like to have a president that understands the plight of his citizens, one who has been in governance and has a verifiable track record, a president that listens and understands what we are going through, a president that will employ experts in different sectors and that will genuinely consult them before making decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. These are the two countries.
Thank you very much, Enugu. Okay, so Dr. Kabiru, this question of attacks, for example, talking about, you've discussed some of the sort of shortcomings of the plans for dealing with insecurity. And when we were talking earlier, we sort of alluded to the fact that a lot of the areas in which you guys are experts have a direct link to sort of the problem of insecurity. So the economy, around poverty, lack of inclusion, lack of gender equity, etc., etc. I want you to sort of help us understand how all of these things fit into what we are seeing today, and then I will get them to sort of chip in with their understanding as well and add a little bit more.
So when you talk of the drivers of insecurity, all of those issues that you've identified can be found somewhere there. Let's use as an example the grievances that are quite pervasive within the society. The economy and all those components around the challenges in the economy, unemployment, poverty, name them, would all kind of drive into the economy. A significant percentage of the persons that feed the non-state actors, especially the armed ones, and I can start reeling them out from the northeast, the two terror groups that we've talked about, the bandits, a lot of them are youth. And why are they easy prey for these groups? It's because they don't have anything to do. Unemployment, the poverty level. One of the easiest ways that these groups recruit from within the youth is to promise them some form of money, sometimes as little as 10%. Then the issue around inclusion. At the time when suicide bombing was very high, one of the strategies they use is to give, especially the women who are victims, to give them some sense of belonging. So, tell them, for instance, that this person killed your husband or killed your dad. Well, why don't you take vengeance? And then they give that woman some idea of what she can do. She becomes focused on that particular idea, and then she gets recognition from within the group. So they understood that, and they used it effectively. Fortunately, the Nigerian military found a strategy that worked, and so it reduced that tendency. Climate change, which we haven't spoken about very well.
He did a little bit, yeah.
The absence of adaptation, especially within at the federal and the state level, has also affected not just the economy, but several communities, and that's also driving, unfortunately, some of the security challenges we're seeing. The justice system, I don't know if we've spoken about that. If we haven't, then it also, unfortunately, leads into insecurity. The interview that BBC did, which I know you commented on it, that particular interview showed how the criminal justice system that is failing to arrest offenders and punish them, unfortunately, has led to the monster that we have in Zamfara.
People wanting to take justice into their own hands, feeling aggrieved.
Exactly.
And
so all of these issues, one way, we can describe them as the drivers of insecurity.
And I mean, talking about the economy and what impact has insecurity had on the growth of the Nigerian economy?
Oh, it has really stifled it. And an example would be in agriculture. Agriculture is the largest contributor to GDP in Nigeria. But farmers, the farmer herders clashes have been, a significant hindrance for Nigerian farmers. So you have farmers in the Middle Belt who, in states like Benue State, who completely abandon their farms because they actually had to risk their lives if they wanted to farm. So the impact of that, if you're not able to farm, you're not able to sell at the end of the season, you lose money, you literally, slide back into poverty if you were before. So that's one impact. Another thing is even like the migration, right? So people have had to migrate from a lot of communities, and because of that, they've lost their lives, their means of livelihoods. They've lost a lot of opportunities, and just some people literally have to leave their homes, leave what they were doing. If they were market women, they're no longer market women. They probably live in IDP camps now. So that's another impact. Another thing, when we're mentioning education, I wanted to chip in was, today, security is one of the hindrances, is one of the causes for out-of-school children in Nigeria. As of July 2021, over 700 children had been kidnapped from school. So the fact that children can no longer go to school, like the fact that there's that real threat that if your child leaves home to go to school, they may not come back. Parents are just not willing to take that chance, especially considering how, what the response of getting children back has been. There's no guarantee that your children would actually come back if they're kidnapped. So those are like the major issues that it has had. People have had to just like live their lives and just like adapt now to the current security situation.
In the communities, Abdullahi, that you spent time in when you were doing the Face of Poverty report, how much impact did insecurity have in terms of influencing people's ability to earn a living in specific terms? Because the reason I keep coming back to you is that some of us are a little bit detached. We sort of read about these things. We hear about it academically, intellectually, we know it's going on. But you've sort of eyeballed these people.
Yes.
And what did you see? What did you find? What are you hearing?
Yes,
what did you hear?
We found out a very important link, which is often not discussed, and it is very important. What we did during the research is we did a causal chain analysis of most especially why do we have this security problem. And all those factors that is in the public domain is there, it's clear. People know why we have high level of insecurity. But one reason, one push factor that has been ignored is the issue of land grabbing. Land that was used as farm has been taken over by politicians, has been taken over by government officials, have been bought over by rich businessmen. Land that was used for grazing is no longer a grazing reserve. It's now somebody's farm. And those who used to graze now don't have the cattle to graze. Those who farm now don't have the farm to go to. So the number of people within the cycle of poverty has increased due largely to people taking their land.
You talked, Dr. Kabir, earlier about the issue of justice or lack of it as being a sort of main driver. Are these the sort of things that you were talking about when, is this what you're finding out in the course of your work on insecurity as the drivers?
Yes, they are, but slightly wider than that. The thing is, each state has its peculiarities. The point he made was very specific around Zamfara, where a particular governor came up with a land use policy that has affected the two major...
It's why we are in trouble today. This was like 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Yes.
And there hasn't been any deliberate effort to correct that. So we've created, quote-unquote, an economy, killed an economy, as it were, and created another one that unfortunately
is based on crime.
A crime. As simple as that. We've seen other state governors attempting to also come into that area and come out with land use acts or policies that have also created their own challenges. So yes, that's one issue. But what I wouldn't want us to do is to think that there are single issues. There are a multitude of issues that all feed into each other and that have created what we have at the moment. Some in certain locations, one issue is bigger than the other, but then each one of them kind of fits into each other. The value system that I don't think we've spoken about, the family system and the communal system that used to hold the fabric of society has almost collapsed in almost all of these societies. I mean, these persons who commit this crime, they are not ghosts. They are people's children. What happened to that family shaping value system, idea that we used to have? It's almost collapsed.
Yeah, I mean, before you came, I had said, that we were going to discuss how essentially poverty, insecurity, and a whole bunch of things are sort of reshaping who we are as a people. But I want to quickly go to the University of Abuja. They are on standby, and then we'll come back and carry on this conversation. Hello, Abuja.
Us here at the University of Abuja. The students here have been following the conversation and they have lots of comments regarding what they expect from the next president of Nigeria come 2023. But since security is on the burner right now, we'll take a question on security directed to Mr. Kabir there. Then we'll take 2 comments on what they expect to see from the president. So Malik has the question for us on security.
I'm Yunus Abdulmalik Yusuf from University of Abuja. So, my question is concerning the insecurity in Nigeria. We know for a fact that there are security intelligence agencies and gathering operatives. So, we know that the security agencies have gathering intelligence gathering, which is being supported by the NOA, which is Nigeria Rotation Agency. So, we are thinking that the government should help in implementing this intelligence gathering, so as to make orientation to us, the citizens, on how to deal with insecurities in the country against our enemies. And for a fact that we all know that, of course, the government is not expected to release its security problems publicly, but we Nigerians, we are hoping that things will get better so in the nearest future. So we are trying to see if Liverpool will be able to implement the intelligence gathering, because we know that every security agencies have intelligence gathering, which is not.
Okay, Mr. Kabir, if you got the question from what he's saying, he's talking about intelligence gathering, strengthening intelligence gathering in Nigeria. That's the question. So we'll go to the comments now. Antonia?
Antonia Abba from the Department of Public Administration. I have my comment on poverty and what I would like to see in the next administration. Within 2015 and 2022, the country has experienced a very high rate of increase in poverty. Citizens have had high cost of living and also low standard of living, coupled with naira that loses value almost every 2 weeks. Apart from that, there is also high deterioration in infrastructure. An administration that has not been able to give us our basic need of food, shelter, and security is what we've had in the past 8 years. I would like the next administration to rejuvenate and provide infrastructure and social amenities, focus on all activities that would increase the value of the naira, like agriculture, tourism, building of industries, increase in technology, anything that would increase the per capita income of citizens would definitely increase income. And I also want the next administration to reduce the dependency on crude oil. Instead, they should focus on building factories so that our crude oil can be mined in our country, and we won't be dependent on other countries of finished products of crude oil. I would also be able to benefit from our own production of crude oil. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. One last comment before we get there. Mansour?
Good evening. My name is Mansour Abdullahi from Department of Microbiology. My comment is on the security. What I would like to see from the next government on security is just what do we do to I don't know the English I should use, but what they can do, how they can equip those security agencies that have been maybe one way or the other not qualified to continue their courses. Like what I'm saying is, like in the NDA, some of all these some of the people that actually went for the trainings don't later become soldiers and something like that. So if they are being disqualified, the government should at least provide something like a polytechnic or another kind of association or stuff that they can do. Because of the training that they have inside of them, they will come out and their mentality is changed. So they will want to come and do something with what they have inside of them. So if the next government that will come to power can provide an opportunity or something separate or another agency, or they can put them into separate agencies that they can join, and then the skills they have, they can put it to work, that would reduce the rate of the insecurity in Nigeria. Because when some of these people come out, they intend to want to use what they've learned. And then if they don't see the right way to use it, they use it the wrong way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Abuja. I think the point has been made. Okay. Dr. Kabiru, a lot of questions around security and insecurity, and a few more actually even before you came here. So essentially, you seem to know what the problem is. You seem to understand its complexity. Alongside you, I'm sure there are a few other experts in this country. Where do we falter? Why are we not able to take this knowledge and translate it into a real solution for the problems of insecurity? Whether it is a military solution or, like some of the young people were suggesting, intelligence-led. I mean, you would have thought there's a room to do all of it. Why are we not doing it? And how much of that failure is also due to the fact that some of these things are outside our control? Because you hear people say there are influences from terrorist groups abroad. There's the issue of arms trafficking and a whole bunch of other things.
I'm sorry to say that those are excuses. I'm going to restrict my response to two areas. One of them is implementation. So we've got these beautiful policies. Name it, we've got a policy on it. If we use counterterrorism, we took our policy to the UNGA General Assembly and told the world that we've come up with a new approach to countering terrorism. What at that time, in fact, that was Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the current the DG of the World Trade Organization. She took that document to the General Assembly, exposed it to the world. It was well received, and we received enormous funding for that project. But where are we in its implementation? Frankly, nowhere. I can name several government policies that have been...
But why?
Because,
and I ask this why, because don't forget, this is a conversation that we're trying to do in relation to those who now want to rule us, and we're wanting to sort of expand the knowledge of people so that they, in asking these questions, hopefully they can arrive at the people who can do it better.
I talked about implementation. Now, how do you enhance implementation? Number one, every time we come out with a policy, let's have an implementation plan. Most times we don't have. And when we develop that implementation plan, let's have key performance indicators. That brings me to the next point, our monitoring and evaluation within the security sector. It's almost zero. Practitioners will tell you it exists, but it's not effective. So they do have a department sometimes that is on M&E, monitoring and evaluation, but that department doesn't have the capacity to develop key performance indicators. And when you are developing those KPIs, key performance indicators, they should be measurable. So there should be a correlation between the action that you have designed for the implementation of that policy with the output. And in setting your standards, it should be one that is realistic. Oil theft. You have government departments that have the mandate for preventing or stopping oil mandate. If you'll be surprised that perhaps in their performance appraisal for last year, some of them scored themselves 130%. And not only that, they would defend it in front of you. What happened? They set themselves a standard that was not realistic. So the M&E mechanism within the security sector needs to be looked at. And I'm happy that you are working with a development partner.
Yeah.
I've spoken extensively that those development partners that want to support the security sector, that is a low-hanging fruit that they can actually achieve. Support especially the civilian component within that security sector, to develop the capacity for monitoring and evaluation, so that when we set those standards, we'll be able to achieve them. The other component, I've talked about implementation, is accountability. Our security sector, perhaps because of the military legacy, suffers from lack of accountability.
How should a new president ensure accountability in the military architecture and the military setup without jeopardizing his own security? Because people tend to be scared of soldiers and all of that.
Unfortunately, that's the legacy of our military past. But, I mean, this is how many years into the Fourth Republic we need to be breaking from that yoke where we're a little bit uncomfortable to take certain actions. Our democracy provides three arms, and it should be the work of the judiciary. So how? Let's strengthen the capacity of the judiciary for oversight on the executive arm of government. Currently, that capacity is a little bit weak. I mean, yeah, the legacy of the military rule, most parliamentarians are a little bit edgy when it comes to oversight within that security
You
sector.
came last, so I want to end with you because I'm running out of time, and I'll come back to you to sort of sum up what you feel about insecurity and what we should be. But if I kind of start from Gbemisola here now, how do Nigerians tell a president who has the capacity to run the economy properly? What should they be looking for in 2 minutes?
Okay, I think the first thing would be looking for someone who fully understands the problems that Nigeria is going through, especially from the policy side, right? So things like understanding that there are leakages with the Nigerian expenditure, understanding that on the revenue side, we cannot be dependent on oil that is so volatile. We can't be dependent on oil revenue that is so volatile. And increasing, rather than increasing taxes or saying that, oh, we're not taxing people enough, you expand the brackets and ensure that you're taxing everybody that is meant to be taxed. You're looking at someone who understands that subsidy, which is something that we've spoken extensively about today, is not helpful to the poor. Rather, you're depriving them of basic needs like education and healthcare. So someone who understands the problem first must be who's going to come and provide the right solutions must understand the problem. So what are the right solutions, right? I'll give an example of something that politicians like to throw around. So things about employment. So someone will come and say, oh, I'm going to ensure that we employ 1 million people. If the person is planning to employ those 1 million people in the civil service, the person does not know what they're talking about. And the person is going to fail.
What about those who say 30 million jobs in 18 months? I've heard someone
exactly.
say that.
So if you're going to say that, then you're looking for someone who would say, okay, we're going to attract 1,000 companies that can employ 100,000 people each. And those are the people that will provide the jobs. So that's how they think about the solution is what we should be thinking about, not just people throwing around words that excite Nigerians.
What should we be looking for in a president that we hope will come and drastically reduce poverty?
Yeah, in the president we expect should be somebody who will move us from the resource-driven economy to knowledge-driven economy. Even for the larger employer of labor, that is agriculture, if we move to a knowledge-driven agriculture, I think we will have a considerable reduction in terms of number of unemployed people, the number of agro-business sector that will expand, and a more reliable power supply that will fuel this knowledge-driven
Somebody who's talking
economy.
about energy transition, energy mixes, and all of that.
They are synergistic in their relationship.
Yeah.
They have a relationship. When you have knowledge and then you don't have power, then you're not going to realize what you want to achieve.
Okay.
But when you have that factors coming into play altogether, I think we will move from where we are now.
So an inclusive president will do what?
Out of the 3-4 major players, we need somebody who will surround himself with experts. You don't have to know it all. Somebody who will surround himself with experts across all the areas we have spoken about. Somebody who will also understand inclusion. Somebody who will listen. we spoke about insecurity. I just quickly want to speak about the women in Oyo State. If you remember the women with the bean traders that were massacred in Borno State, that you're looking for somebody who understands insecurity, who would be firm, who will be inclusive, the firm, and surround himself with experts.
Dr. Kabiru, last but not the least, our president who will solve insecurity, what qualities is he likely to have?
I mean, carrying on from where Madam mentioned, that firmness is absolutely important. In the area of security, you are protecting life, just like Section 14, subsection 2 of the Constitution says. That should be paramount. Whatever action the president is going to take should be an action that protects life and property for the law-abiding Nigeria. That means anyone who breaks the law, there shouldn't be sympathy for that person. And that brings us to the point around accountability that I mentioned earlier on. So there are 3 arms of government, and each of them have a role to play in security. I'm hoping to hear. Unfortunately, I have picked the manifesto of most of the parties, and they are a little bit shallow. I need to see depth in what the candidates and the parties are putting forward to Nigerians. So as an example, when you say you're going to recruit this number of persons within the security sector, well, is that the challenge at the moment? We've spoken about...
how do we ensure that voters, though, are sort of that discerning, the way you as experts are discerning?
I think you're doing an amazing job. The number of debates I have seen are quite interesting. And what they are doing is they are showing Nigerians where the gaps are. But I think we need to take it a little bit forward by analyzing the outcome of those debates and making Nigerians aware that these are some of the gaps. And this kind of discussions would help in that regard. Otherwise, believe me, what's going to happen is they're going to pull a wool.
In 2023, we're going to be
back. The average Nigerian, if he hears someone say he's going to employ 1 million personnel within the security agencies, you'll probably clap for him.
Yes.
But then we know that that's not the solution. It needs a little bit more than that. All those drivers that we've spoken about, if we don't address them, and then we end up recruiting 1 million military personnel or police, then unfortunately we'll still be where we are. So accountability, especially implementation of some of the policies we have, using monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to measure those performances. I mean, the argument would be, okay, security is confidential, it's secret, you shouldn't say it to the world, but let them do it within that sector. There are 27 ministries, departments, and agencies in security. We spend huge sums of money to fund those agencies, but unfortunately the output, as I mentioned earlier on, is that in 1 year, up to 9,000 people are being killed. That's not good enough.
Okay, well, thank you so much to the 4 of you. Let me start by thanking the man who was first here and then he left, Mr. Nicholas Ibikwe, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, Toun Shoneye, Abdullahi Mohammed, and Gbemisola. I keep forgetting Gbemisola, your surname. I'm sorry, Elonge. Yes? Thank you so much for coming. And let me also quickly thank Mr. Waziri Adio, who had a hand in helping me put this together at such short notice. He works with Agora Policy, which is another MacArthur grantee, and an Abuja-based think tank. So thank you so much for all of that. With this, we have come to the end of our town hall series, The Candidates. I want to say thank you to all the pundits who graciously agreed to take part in the pundit shows over the last 7 days. Also to all our anchors in the remote locations, as well as everyone who answered the call to be part of the audience in Enugu, Abuja, Kano, Maiduguri, Bayelsa, and Ibadan. And of course to the Lagos audience who came in physically. The production crew have just done stellar work. It would not have been possible without the leadership of the Kabal Media team, Daria Media. Our gratitude especially goes to the MacArthur Foundation, the Nigeria Television Authority, Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria, Radio Now, Emmanuel Chapel, Zikoko Citizen, Silverbird Television, Trust TV, Injenje Media, New Central Television, Plus TV, Kaftan TV, YouTube, Out There Media, Amede, and of course Purple Dove. Thank you very much to everyone who made this possible. We look forward to having free and fair elections. And of course, we'll continue to talk about these issues because we still have a long way to go before the polls. Have a wonderful evening.